Good afternoon, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I think that's 2 o'clock, so, well, it's 2 o'clock on one clock and not on the other, but we'll just go with that. Welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Lifelong Learning Committee. Before we begin today's meeting, can I please ask everyone to note that the meeting is finally being recorded and will be publicly available to view on the Council's website following the meeting. So a historic day as we finally get these machines working. The usual fire evacuation procedures: if the fire alarm sounds, everyone should leave the building using the nearest emergency exit, and elected members and staff should make their way to the usual designated fire assembly point on Tay Street. Can I ask everyone to make sure that their mobile phones and any other devices are on silent? And can I ask if there's any apologies for today's meeting?
Apologies from Councillor Audrey Coates, who's been substituted by Councillor Chris Ahern. Apologies from Tom McEwen with substitute Councillor Stuart Donaldson. Apologies from Councillor Beth Pover with substitute Councillor Mike Williamson. And apologies for Councillor Fiona Sarwar being substituted by Councillor Andrew Parrott. And the non-elected members, Mrs Pat Giles and Mrs Audrey McCauley, both send their apologies.
Thank you. Item 2, can I ask if there's any declarations of interest in respect of the business on the agenda from members?
I have a non-financial interest in paper 5 with regards to Tayside contracts.
Convener, I also have the same.
And for the record, so do I.
And if on the basis of being a member of the Tayside Contracts Board is the case, then I would declare an interest as well. It's tenuous, but it's there.
Thank you. Moving on to the minutes of previous meetings, can we agree the minutes of the Lifelong Learning Committee of the 1st of November for signature? And can we note the minute of the Joint Negotiating Committee for Teaching Staff of the 19th of September? Item 4, the Community Planning Partnership. Can we note the minutes of the Children, Young People and Families Partnership of the 8th of September? And the Economy and Lifelong Learning Group of the 22nd of September. So moving into the business of this afternoon. Paper 5 before you on page 25 of the pack is the update report on the review of community campuses. This report provides an update on the changes that have been implemented in respect of the review of community campuses at Bredalbin, Lochleven and Strathearn. The review has achieved the required savings of £180,000 and almost all the improvement actions specified in the improvement plan have been completed, and it's anticipated that there will be a fully integrated in the campuses by April 2018. Laura and Greg are here and to ask if there's any questions on the report.
Convener, a question for you. I think this is a very positive report, and the fact that the savings have been achieved of the 180,000. I also think that the move towards having a formal structure for the campus operational management groups is a positive step. One of the omissions from the guidance that went out to the campuses for the draft constitution was the lack of a community council representative, which I think would be something that would be very positive, given that they're also another statutory body and represent constituents within the campus areas. I would like to ask if the convener, if she is minded to agree, that we could agree an additional recommendation of the report to update the guidance to suggest that campuses also appoint a community council representative should there be a community council in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purvis. I personally have no objection to that. Any other views from around the table? I know it was something we did discuss previously. Officers content that there's no reason we can't do it, essentially. Okay, well, with the committee's agreement then, we'll add that to the report. Any other comments or questions on the report? I think while Laura and Greg are here, it'd be nice to know all of the effort that's gone into this. Laura and I met up at the Bredalbin campus, where she pointed out that you could have a coffee, go for a swim, take your child to the library and attend meetings all in one session. So we certainly got round it up there. So thank you very much. And if you could pass on all of our thanks to all those who have been involved in this piece of work and achieving the quite significant amount of savings, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. So to just close that one down. Oh, no, I asked if there were any comments. There were none. Any comments? No? No. No. Okay. So can we just note the progress of the review, agree the conclusion of the review by April this year, request that the Executive Director take forward marketing plans as part of the annual campus self-evaluation process. Noted and agreed. Thank you. And the additional recommendation be included. Okay, so moving into the next part, onto paper 6. Before we get there, I'd like to thank all of those who attended the briefing session that was run on the school estate review process and the legal requirements and the statutory guidance that we're issued with. And thanks Sarah, Roger and Sheena and Karen for all of their advice and support at that session. It was very useful. This council aspires to have fit-for-purpose school buildings which not only reflect the high value placed on learning but are efficient and effective to manage. To achieve this, we recognise that we need to continue to transform the school estate. The previous Lifelong Learning Committee under the last administration approved a number of option appraisals as phase 1 of a transformation programme back in November 2016. Today, committee will consider the following options appraisals and the next steps for St Ninian's Episcopal Primary School, Forteviot Primary School, Balhousie Primary School and North Muirton Primary School. It is anticipated that the rest of the schools included in phase 1 will be presented to the Lifelong Learning Committee meeting that's to be held in March 2018. Each of the 3 papers we will consider today provides detailed information on the school and community in which the school is located. This includes feedback from the local community which was collated through the drop-in sessions and the online questionnaires. A number of options are assessed for each school and a preferred option is proposed. The options appraisals take consideration of the Schools Consultation Scotland Act 2010. So moving into the papers, the first report which you've been asked to consider is paper 6, which is the options appraisal for St Ninian's Episcopal Primary School. It was agreed an option appraisal should be carried out on the school due to under-occupancy in this case. And the recommendation put before you of the options appraisal is that the school remains open and that a new non-denominational local authority nursery is established at the school. This will be achieved by reconfiguring internal space within the building and reducing the capacity of the school for primary school pupils. This will support this council's objectives in line with the Scottish Government's plans of expanding nursery provision from 600 hours to 1140 hours throughout Perth Kinross and also use the building more effectively. It is anticipated that this will also sustain pupil numbers in the school and support the transition of nursery pupils into primary 1. Once the nursery is established, officers will bring back a paper to a future meeting of the Lifelong Learning Committee with a revised capacity for the school. Can I ask if there's any questions on paper 6? Councillor Anderson.
Yes, reading this paper, this school seems to have a greater reliance on placement requests. How does the officer view that? Because does that not put it in a very tenuous situation that you're relying on placement requests to keep the number of primary pupils up in this school?
I'll start to answer your question, Councillor Anderson, and then my colleague Karen Robertson will be able to come in with some more of the detail. This is an unusual situation in that this is a denominational school and the denomination is Episcopalian, and as such the school does not have a designated catchment area, and therefore there would be, because of that, placing requests required to attend the school if it doesn't have a designated catchment area. Karen can give a bit more of the background as to why that's the case, but that is actually the answer to your question.
Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, Councillor Anderson. As the Executive Director has explained, the school is Episcopalian, so in terms of entitled pupils, that would be those pupils who are baptised Episcopalian. All other children would be required to make a placing request. And whilst I note your point that the school is dependent on placing requests, that has been the position at St Ninian's certainly in the past 25 years. So it hasn't been a case that the role has been made up by a large number of entitled pupils, and some placing requests. They have all mainly, in the main, been placing requests.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Convener. I might have missed it in here. Could you tell me what the new capacity will be once we convert part of the school for earlier years, for both the early years and for the full primary school, please?
You haven't missed that information in the report, Councillor Dade. We're not in a position until such time as we'll look to do the feasibility study for the nursery, understand what the capacity would be. There's an indicative capacity, I think, outlined in the depth of some of the appendices, and that was about 24 for the nursery. But until such time as we've actually undertaken the feasibility study, we would not be able to be confirming that, which is why one of the recommendations in the report is that we would bring that information back here by necessity.
Follow up.
Yes, please. Just a follow-up based on, I visited Balhousie this morning, and one of the things that I certainly was struck by was the importance of, within the nursery area, that there should be obviously nursery appropriate toilets, etc., and also that children should be able to view their height at the appropriate level, etc. Will we have money and resources available to make a proper job of it, essentially, and make it a good learning environment?
Absolutely. The plan is, not would be, but the plan is if we get the go-ahead, then it would be fully appropriate in terms of how it's kitted out, age and stage.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Any comments, Councillor Parry?
Thank you very much, Convener. I'd just like to record my contentment, if I may, that a continuing efficient and effective role has been found for the St Ninian's School. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. We're delighted to support this paper on this side of the table chamber debate. Delete as appropriate for three reasons. Firstly, any imaginative use of school buildings to keep them open is to be welcomed. Secondly, and I'll apologise to members of the committee who've heard me prattling on about this before, but I'm extremely encouraged by the early years expansion to 1,140 hours for all kids, rich, poor, privileged, deprived, none of the above. The universal aspect of it's really important. Early access to nursery care will transform society in Scotland going forward, as far as I'm concerned. And I hope that some parents at least are able to escape the modern society's disgrace that's in work poverty. So for that reason, I very much support the nursery part of this proposal. And thirdly, in a practical sense, it hopefully supports the school role going forward as young learners transition from nursery into primary. So I'm delighted to commend this paper. Thank you.
Councillor Purvis.
I would just like to echo some of the comments that have been made by Councillors Rebeck and Parrott. I think this is a great way of finding a solution to the problem of having a school that's significantly under-occupied, and also tackling some of the challenges, the new pressures of the early learning and childcare, the expansion from 600 to 1,140 hours a week, a year, will bring. So that would be even more challenging, but thank you. Okay.
Councillor Hearn.
Thank you, Convener. As a ward member that covers this school, I'd just like to put my thanks and backing of the recommendation, especially the introduction of a new primary school, the nursery places, especially having spoken to the parents on the option appraisal evening that we had there. Thanks very much.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. Well, I'm so old now that I can remember St Ninian's Episcopal Primary School when it was part of the cathedral, which is now occupied by PCAVs. Those of you who are a lot younger and a lot newer in the process than me will probably know a bit of that as well. Councillor Anderson asked an interesting question. He was trying to safeguard the future, I think, with his question about will there continue to be placing requests. I think the addition of the nursery here in the outlined envisaged form will actually reinforce that process, Councillor Anderson, because it will encourage young people, young folk to send their kids to the nursery, and there's always a synergy between nursery attendance and primary attendance. And I think that will enhance the role of St Ninian's. Also think it is an underused building that will be better used and more intensively used. I'm keen to see what the primary capacity is, but we'll be told that in due course, because I think that will further enhance the school. Placing requests in themselves are not a problem. It is unique. I think there are only 2 Episcopal denominational primary schools in Scotland, and it's something we should be proud of. It's part of our heritage, and I think part of Perth and part of our links with St Ninian's Cathedral was a significant part of our social fabric. However, I think even more importantly, the school location is extremely valuable in that it's well placed as just on the periphery of the city centre. In fact, I would say it is city centre school that allows choice. It allows choice for people who live slightly north of the school. It allows choice who live in the newer housing to the west of the school, and those in the city centre, as well as those who might want to come there purely as a matter of complete choice as a placing request. And therefore, I think the location of this school on an ongoing basis is of great value socially and educationally to the city.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. No further comments? Oh, Councillor Baird.
Just make a small comment. I'd like to thank all the parents and members of the community who got involved in this process, because I think it really is encouraging when people realise a school is not only about the parents, it's all those who live around it. So thank them for their interest and their positive comments that they made about the school. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm delighted that we can unanimously agree on this, because I think it really is actually a very significant investment in St Ninian's, which is a fantastic wee school. And I think I'd also like to personally thank the members of the Parent Council who were very easy to engage with at the consultation session. I had some great ideas and look forward to this next phase. So if we can agree that St Ninian's Episcopal Primary School remains open and that a new non-denominational local authority nursery is established at the school. So moving on to paper 7, which is the options appraisal for Forteviot Primary School. Very different area again. Forteviot Primary School was mothballed on 24th October 2016 with the agreement of parents with pupils at the school at that time. This means the operation of the school has been suspended with pupils moving to another school. There were a total of 3 pupils attending the school when it was mothballed in October 16. The report states that it is not anticipated that Forteviot Primary School will have a sustainable role in the next 4 years for which projected pupil numbers are known. The report demonstrates that consideration was given to extending the catchment of Forteviot Primary School in a number of directions. However, this would not make the role sustainable. The recommendation in front of you from the options appraisal is to consider closing Forteviot Primary School and the pupils to move to attend Forgandenny Primary School. The committee is asked to approve that a statutory consultation exercise takes place on the proposal to close the school, with the existing Forteviot Primary School catchment area being subsumed into the Forgandenny Primary School catchment area. Can I ask if there's any questions on the report? Councillor Baird and then Councillor McDade.
Thank you very much. My first question is about the next stage, the statutory consultation. Who is all going to be consulted, and what kind of questions are they going to be asked? And supplementary to that, after that part, as I presume the school will probably be going to be marketed, when would that be? And I'll give the whole lot. What we do not want to see is a building sitting, deteriorating in a rural area, as has happened in the past.
Councillor Baird, I'll provide some of the answers to some parts of the questions, and I know that colleagues will be able to give you some more of the detail. But in relation to undertaking a statutory consultation, there's very clear guidance on who the statutory consultees are, and Karen and Sarah would be able to give you a flavour of who we are bound in legislation to consult with. In terms of what the consultation consults of, that would be wide-ranging and would also be determined by the kind of information that's brought to any of the meetings as well, so that there's not a limit to what people can raise during that process, and everything needs to be taken account of. If we undertake a statutory consultation and out of that comes a view that it's the recommendation is that a school would be closed, that decision would then of course come back to committee for committee to make that decision. In terms of the marketing of any building that then may be surplus to educational requirements, there are a couple of steps that need to be undertaken. And one of those is to check the deeds first and foremost, because some of our schools are actually not council property, that they belong to estates, and therefore if they cease to be operational for educational purposes, then we would hand those back to the estate. So that kind of due process would be undertaken. If Education and Children's Services had no further use of the building, we would then declare that surplus for our use, and it would then be considered by other services as to whether that was something that was of interest to them or not. There's also nowadays the option of community asset transfer that would need to be taken into account, and there is then about going to the market as well. What we do know in relation to Forteviot is that there has already been considerable interest from a range of different organisations about possible use of the building beyond it being a school. So that's all I would say on that. And if you wanted some more information about who the statutory consultees are, if that would be helpful for you today, then Karen and Sarah can provide some of that information just now.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Baird. In terms of the statutory consultees, that is set out in the consultation legislation. So if it were agreed today to proceed forward to a statutory consultation, we would be required as an authority to produce and publish a proposal paper. So in relation to the questions that we would be asking, we would have to set out the Council's proposal on which we would be seeking views. The consultees that we would be required to consult would be the parents of pupils who are currently affected at, who currently attend an affected school, and for the purposes of the option that is before you, that would be those children living within the existing Forteviot catchment area and Forgan-Denny catchment area, which has been determined as the alternative school. So the parents of those pupils would be consulted, the pupils themselves would be consulted, staff in the school would be consulted, the parent council would be consulted, the community council, and also the parents of any pupils who would be affected within 2 years of the proposal being implemented. So that would be looking at the parents of preschool and anti-preschool children. What we have done with statutory consultations in the council in the past has to keep our consultations open. So we have made those publicly available and open to all members of the public. The council, there is a requirement to hold public meetings for the service to explain the proposal, take representations from anyone who attends, and make sure people know what the process is to make further representations to the council. So it is a very set out process, but we haven't excluded anyone, and it wouldn't be our intention to exclude anyone from future statutory consultations. So we'd be open to the wider community as well as those that are determined by the legislation.
Councillor McDade and then Councillor Anderson.
My question's already been answered in part of Councillor Baird, which is around the future use of the school. I'm aware of the Council's policy about being surplus to educational requirements, and I'm pleased to hear that there are community potential uses, and I would be keen that we encourage that wherever possible as part of this, and explore that with them in great detail so that we can move that and we don't have empty buildings in rural areas.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I have 3 questions around how this process has come to this report. My first question is what was the reasoning behind option 1 and option 4 being separated and not combined in the assessment on their combination effects, what would have been the outcome? Second question, or do you want to answer that first? Yeah.
I think option 4 is also option 1, so option 4 includes option 1 as well.
No, why were they split if they're both the same option? It's rather confusing.
Option 4 is a catchment review, which would increase the catchment area for Forteviot, and option 1 is just to sustain the school as it is. So that would be for Forteviot catchment only. So option 4 takes catchments around about Forteviot and would add pupils into Forteviot. Option 1 is Forteviot catchment as it exists. That's why they've been done separately. Is that what?
Okay.
Could I just add to that, Councillor Anderson, that in option 1, it would be that the school remains open but continue with the mothballing, and we don't consider that that would be a good use of physical asset to continue to have a building that was open but not used. And in option 4, we'd be looking at the business of exploring all the different options of different catchment delineation, and through the exploration of that established that we couldn't come up with a catchment that would be sustainable for the school in the future. So that there are subtle differences between that, but fundamentally with option 1 it would be a kind of do nothing and leave the school sitting with nothing and nobody in it.
Which wouldn't be a good idea anyway. However, my second question is, have we adopted the rural toolkit in our approach to making decisions and recommendations on rural schools?
I can answer that we have followed all the guidance in relation to the pre-consultation stages and the giving due cognizance to the issue of rural schools in addition.
Supplementary to that, before we go on to my last one, is this classed as a rural school in a rural catchment area?
I think in the paper there's a classification. I'm just looking for where it says in the paper, because it does describe that this is a
3.1.
3.1.
Sheena. Right at the bottom of the page, 1, 2.
Accessible rural as opposed to remote rural. So there's 2 classifications of rural. This is an accessible rural school.
Thank you. And finally, got a question here. It regards the consultation, which sadly I wasn't able to attend, but I have it from people that had attended the consultation that the area that Forteviot is part of, to me, is the Lower Erne, which includes Forgandenny, Forteviot, Bridge of Erne, Abernethy and Oudenarde. And one of the questions asked was, why was it that the Oudenarde children were conveyed to Inchview way back when there could have been a possibility of keeping rural schools in the area populated, and this wasn't done, so they were taken out of a rural area and put into an urban area. When this question was asked, they were told that 80 children was the figures in primary school education at Inchview for Oudenarde, when in fact it's 35. So can someone kind of give me some clarity on why that was stated?
Karen?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I think to revert back to the point where a decision was taken that Inchview was to be the designated school for pupils living at Oudenarde, the council had to take consideration of what size that development would be, the potential number of pupils who would be generated from that development, and the Education and Children's Services at that point was quite clear that without there being a primary school within that area itself, we had to look for a school that would have sufficient capacity to accommodate all the children who could be living in Oudenaarde. So that was the decision that was taken at the time before any houses were built on that area. In relation to the point you've made around why Forteviot wasn't considered, the capacity for Forteviot was a maximum of 50 pupils. We know that currently there are 86 primary school pupils living in Oudenaarde. 57 primary and 29 secondary, that are within the catchment area and therefore could be zoned to Inchview, and therefore that exceeds the capacity of Forteviot, which in addition to the children who live in Forteviot would also take that above what Forteviot could have managed in terms of pupil numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Purvis.
Thank you, Convener. In the report, it talks about some of the benefits that the pupils will get from moving to Forgandenny. That they've already been able to enjoy, including the breakout areas, the school grounds, the adjacent park, the kitchen for pupils as well, and also the wider social circle, which will allow them to interact with a wider range of people. It also says that the pupils who have moved already since the mothballing have been integrated fully into the school. I wondered if officers could just give a bit more detail on that and how that successful transition has been managed.
Thank you, Councillor Purvis. As it turned out, the reason that this school is mothballed is that by September of 2016 there were only 3 pupils existing within the school, and that had moved from 14 who had been enrolled in 2016, and effectively parents voted with their feet and chose to move their children from Forgandenny to Forteviot, the other way around, Forteviot to Forgandenny, on the basis that they wanted that educational benefit of a wider peer group for their children. And therefore, by the time we got to a situation where there were 3 children left in the school, parents wanted us to do something in terms of making sure that the educational experience for their children was not that of 3 pupils. So it's been very positive, it's been a very seamless transition. A large majority of the children who would attend Forteviot have gone to Forgandenny over a number of years, so the children know each other very well. The school's had very positive recent inspections, and parents are very happy with the educational provision that's set out there.
Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Convener. Just looking at the school roll, it seems in 2015-16 it quite literally fell off a cliff from 14 to 5. Was there a particular reason for that?
No, there wasn't, Councillor Forbes. It was just a natural progression of parental choice. And what I would say is that the head teacher at that time made significant efforts within the community to reinvigorate the school and encourage parents to come to Forteviot School, and did a very good job, such that the only regret that was expressed by parents when we went to the mothballing of the school was that the efforts of that head teacher had been very much appreciated by the community, but the parents themselves chose a different provision for their children.
Thank you, Convener. This is very unfortunate for Forteviot School, very unfortunate indeed, and I strongly suspect that there was much publicity put out that Forteviot School had dropped down to a C class, and after that publicity, my personal knowledge is reason for 10 of the pupils leaving and asking for placements elsewhere. And I think there's only 5 actually go to Forgandenny. The rest are always are placements. And I'm really disappointed that if you go back, I disagree with the whole idea that when the catchment area for the troubled Oudenaarde development, because it was troubled then and we still don't seem to be getting out of the issues there, the decision was made to move children from a very rural area into an urban school. And the reason I'm saying this, and I've read quite a few reports, this is an issue for children because they're getting educated in urban education system, which is great and gives them a very, very well-rounded education. But the fact is, it's not anything to do with a rural education. If these children were in the Lower Erne area and educated there, they would have more idea of the whole rural thing, whether it is highly mechanised farming and the safety issues around that, which is often discussed in rural schools, or the fact that the environment and seeing how the agricultural environment and the forestry, etc., works. These children have been denied that, being put into this urban school. And if the thought had gone at that time, we wouldn't be in the position we are in now of having to close a rural school. It would have been populated. We know they would have been placing requests from Oudenarde. There is placing requests. There's 35. It's been pretty stable, that veering from 35 to 40 throughout. So unfortunately, we are where we are with this. But I'm deeply unhappy that decisions made before I even was in a community council, never mind a council, has had an impact on what is going on today. It is very unfortunate, and I hope officers and councillors will take on board this, and as we move forward, think about what we're doing that will impact in 10, 15 and 20 years, rather than what is happening at the present day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Convener. Yes, I mean, I was a councillor for Forteviot School many years ago, and at that point, Forteviot School was a vibrant school with lots of people, children living in the area, lots of farms round about, had lots of workers, and it was a very vibrant school. I could tell you a wee story about the song sang about me, but I'll leave that for another day. Those grandparents will remember that song. But now times have moved on. There are so few people living in that area, and I have watched the role of the school going down because people have chosen to go to school at Dunning because parents maybe work that direction. There has been no new house building in Forteviot for many years, and it's very, very unlikely. The church was very, very important, but I attended the open meeting, and there were two parents from the school there, and they said they'd move the children to Forgandenny, and if Forteviot opened tomorrow, they would not send their children back. They were very happy at Forgandenny. There was a lot of former teachers there who knew the school as it was back in the day. It's not like that now, and I think everybody was there. Though in their hearts they desired the school to open, but they knew that it was just not practically possible. And members of the community I've spoken to would like to see the building used for something else, whether it be to bring business or what, but they've accepted that Forgandenny, and they're so close-knit communities that it's been a seamless transfer. So I'm sorry to see it happen, but I think we've really got to be realistic that the children are happy at Forgandenny in a lovely little school with a park next door, the church there, the wee shop. The children are happy, so I support it.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Convener. I'm just following on from Councillor Anderson's point regarding what happened in the past. I have no idea what period of time he's talking about, but I suspect the people who were in administration at that point made the best decision they could under the circumstances that they found themselves in. Perhaps this was something to do with budget cuts, or perhaps it was just the way of education at that point in time. But we are where we are. We have a school roll that got down to 5. The school is effectively, and I say that advisedly, closed. I mean, it's certainly mothballed. I don't see any other option we have but to go forward with this.
Any further comments? Oh, Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. Well, just to follow on the point about Oudenarde, which Councillor Anderson, I totally agree with your comments about the difficult history we've had with Oudenarde and still continue to have it. One of the real fly in the ointment as far as the school is concerned is because the developer has dragged his heels or their heels in relation to actually making a contribution to the council to provide the new school, and that's been something that's gone on. The signing of the Section 75 agreement has been a lengthy process in the least. And I think, whilst you made the case for the transfer, we're past that. I think we're well past that point. And I would just want to place on record, Convener, that I think the very good education that's carried out at Inchview for the bairns who come from Oudenaarde, as well as those who come from Perth South and further afield. In a perfect world, we would want rural schools to continue. In this case, we have a slight overlap between Forteviot, Dunning and Forgandenny in that they're reasonably close together as villages, although they're distinct communities. And the change in land-based industries, not just in agriculture, has meant, especially, and this has accelerated in the last few years, the population base, the commuter living in the countryside has increased. The number of folk who rely on living in a parish on land-based industries has reduced or has changed remarkably, especially in the last 5 years. And I think that has made a big difference to the availability of young people in the parish or in the catchment area. The other big change is that Scottish Government policies, and include GIRFIC and the Curriculum for Excellence, and the whole initiative about increasing nursery spaces, has meant that it was much more difficult for a small school to provide all of the facilities, all of the services, and all of the availability a very small school that a school further along the road can provide. And that's just a fact of life. That's something to do with scale and something to do with size. So we need to have cognizance that these decisions that are taken at Scottish Government level and continue to be taken have an influence on this process. And therefore, for all of these reasons, I'm reluctant about this, to be honest. It would be lovely if there were an influx of folk into Forteviot, but it's not going to happen. And therefore, I think we need to face up to that. It's not going to happen soon in the future. And folk have already said either the bairns or the parents have voted with their feet and gone to another school. That's no reflection on the excellent efforts made at Forteviot. It's just a piece of reality that I think we reluctantly need to accept.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any further comments? I'd just like to echo some of the comments that we made about the community consultation event. The community were extremely positive about the opportunities that their community had for particularly using potentially the building for things for their community. And just to reassure Councillor Anderson, we plug for the Royal Highland Educational Trust that go into all our schools and offer some pretty fantastic education on the way of rural farming, etc. I don't know if Councillor Lyle's still in the chamber, but I think he would echo that. So if we can just I'll move the report that we agree that a statutory consultation exercise takes place on the proposal to close the school, with the existing Forteviot Primary School catchment area being subsumed into the Forgandenny Primary School catchment area. Thank you. Okay, that takes us on to paper 8, which is the options appraisal for Balhousie Primary School and North Muirton Primary School. It was agreed that an options appraisal should be carried out on Balhousie Primary School due to the condition and suitability rating of the school. The occupancy of the school is also less than 50%. North Muirton Primary School is being reviewed due to the condition rating of the school. Both schools have been considered in a single options appraisal, firstly because they have neighbouring catchment areas, but also because there is a £16 million in the Council's Composite Capital Programme for a replacement school in North Perth. The report proposes that a new school is built on the current site of North Muirton Primary School. This school will be designed to accommodate pupils from North Muirton Primary School and Balhousie Primary School, and the new school would be completed by 2022. In order to progress the preferred option, committee are being asked to approve a statutory consultation to close Balhousie Primary School and for the catchment area to be subsumed into the North Muirton Primary School catchment area when the new school is completed. Can I ask if there's any questions on the report? Councillor Ford. Councillor Parrott, then Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. I have a number of questions. I have two questions, in fact, if you'll bear with me. Firstly, at section 4.3 of the options appraisal, socio-economic factors are set out. Can you show me where in the paper these factors are actually taken into account and given weighting in the consideration of options? And my second question, if I may, at section 5.1 of the options appraisal, it is noted that the capacity of Balhousie School jumped from 125 to 224 in 2012. How did this new capacity come to be provided? What investment was made in it, and what effort was made to fill it? Is it not more appropriate to say that with 113 pupils in 2016, the school was actually at 90% of its true capacity? And indeed, a figure I saw yesterday says that the school roll is 111, not the 101 quoted in papers. Thank you.
Councillor Parrott, can I just ask you to clarify the pages that you're referring to?
The first one is section 4.3 of the appraisal.
That's on page 194.
Page 194, 195, and section 5.1, page 197. Thank you.
Thank you. To Carol and Sarah to answer these.
Councillor Parrott, in terms of socio-economic impact, it's considered throughout the paper. It's considered in the educational benefits statement, and there is a paragraph under 11.6 in relation to socio-economic impact. So we're looking at it in terms of a new school. We have suggested there may be an economic impact on families if they choose to take public transport or a car to North Muirton, which is further to travel for them. But we've also noted that it would benefit families, the after-school club and the breakfast club that's provided at North Muirton Primary School. So we feel there are benefits and there is an economic impact potentially in terms of travel.
Thank you. That's fine as far as it goes, but you've only looked at one of the recommendations. All your comment is with regard to the selected recommendation. You don't make any similar comment about the socio-economic impact of the school staying at Balhousie. Thank you.
You are correct, Councillor Parrott. Can you repeat the question on capacity, please?
I note from the papers provided that the capacity of the school jumped from 125 to 224 in 2012. How did this new capacity come to be provided? What investment was made in it, and what effort was made to fill it? Is it not more true to say that with 113 pupils in 2016, the school's actually at 90% of its true capacity, which is 125 and not 224. No effort has been made to cater for any additional capacity. Thank you.
The capacity was increased when services from the council moved out to other places, Perth Grammar School, and the sports development team moved out as well. The capacity was increased. Basically, capacity is based on space within a school, number of classrooms. The capacity is based on there being 8 classes at Balhousie that can be used by the pupils.
Thank you. With respect, I'd argue that simply taking away a function from the building does not invest in additional capacity for the school, and unless there was an additional investment in that primary school to service that additional capacity. The true capacity of the school that you can honestly quote is the original capacity, I believe 115. And if that is the case, which I think is reasonable, At the moment, the school is at nearly 90% capacity, 111 pupils. Thank you.
Councillor Parrott, the capacity of the school had previously been higher than 125. I think possibly back in the day, and Councillor Wilson may remember, it probably was more than 300.
May I just provide another bit of information at the point when the capacity was increased, when there was the early years and childcare strategy team were previously based in Balhousie, as were some of the active schools, and when new accommodation was found for them. The basis of that was to try and ensure a more viable and sustainable capacity for Balhousie, and the various head teachers who have been in post during that time, along with officers from the council, were very active in terms of promoting the school as an attractive option for parents to come to have their children educated. And I know that there was considerable work done to that. So the move to make the school more viable was done in exactly the spirit of that, to provide a viability for one of the schools in town, Councillor Parrott.
Thank you. I accept that, and that's fair, but also would argue that regardless of the size of the building, if in recent years you have not sought to exploit its full capacity, you cannot now quote that full capacity in any work being taken forward. Thank you.
Were you coming back in, Carol? No.
I was just going to say that there wasn't works done so that people could be accommodated in their capacity previously, so there are still classrooms. And the school was built to be a capacity of 224 or 300.
Thank you. I have Councillor Forbes, Councillor Anderson, Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Convener. I can't quite put my finger on the number in here, but I think there's somewhere in excess of 100 children who could go to this school, but for one reason or another choose not to. Have we done any research to find out why that is?
Are we fighting to go green? In relation to that, Councillor Forbes, my understanding is that of the total number of youngsters who live in the catchment, there's something like 68, high 60s, choose to go to their catchment school, and something like 200 young people who would be eligible as catchment pupils choose not to attend their local catchment school. The reasons for that are many and varied. They're often linked to, well, obviously, parental choice around perhaps a denominational school as being a preferred option for a number of those young people, which is the case here. A lot of it links to where people work and the route that they take to work and where their available childcare is. And so there are varied and many factors in relation to why there are significantly high numbers of youngsters don't currently attend the school who would be eligible.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Convener. I refer to page 197 and paragraph 5.1. The options appraisal is noted that there is an estimated 200 new houses to be built in the Balhousie school catchment area. Why, with this estimated amount of houses, it seems to be they will only generate additional 8 pupils for Balhousie school? Can someone square that off?
Carol.
Councillor Anderson, it would be 8 pupils per year. The houses build out a period of 30 houses or 20 houses a year, so we take it based on the number of houses. Obviously, as children are coming into the school, children are going out as well, so that impacts on the figures. I'd have to say that we have been looking at figures carefully over the last 10 years, and 200 houses have already been built within the Muirton area, and it has had little impact on the population of Balhousie Primary School. We have, however, included these within the figures here because we realise that St John's is relatively full now compared to how it used to be a number of years ago. So we've made an assumption that some of the children that would normally go to St John's will not be able to be placed at St John's and will have to go to Balhousie. So we've estimated that we'll have about 140 pupils in Balhousie in 3 to 4 years' time if the house building proceeds.
I've got another question, but just to follow that, you said, it says here Balhousie School catchment area, yet you're referring to St John's being the catchment area. That's a bit confusing.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. The denominational schools have a catchment area which sits above our non-denominational schools. So for children living in Balhousie Primary School's catchment area, they are also within the catchment area of St John's, as it encompasses Balhousie and a number of other surrounding schools. So children who attend St John's are there, most of them as a result of it being their catchment denominational school. So all children have a catchment denominational school and a catchment non-denominational school.
So these figures really could go either way then?
The Balhousie figures are calculated on previous figures for Balhousie. St John's are potentially more difficult to calculate because of them having a wider catchment, but the Balhousie figures are based on children that live within the Balhousie catchment area, the number of children from Balhousie who tend to go to other schools in terms going forward, and the house building that we expect. So they are projections and we use them for forward planning. The Balhousie ones are good figures, the St John's ones are more difficult to calculate going forward.
My second question is on page 203, and it's paragraph 7.8 of the options appraisal. The listed nature of Balhousie School building is mentioned. Has there been any exploration of the constraints this would be imposed beyond the simple assumption that has been made? Has there been any possibility for grant funding for restoring traditional buildings, and has that been explored?
Can I ask Stephen Crawford if he can answer that?
In short, that hasn't been explored, but our experience is there's limited external funding for listed buildings.
But if it hasn't been explored, it's only anecdotal.
Yeah, straight question. To answer your straight question, we haven't explored it.
Thank you.
In relation to that, Councillor Anderson, we do have experience with other schools such as the Old Caledonian Road, where we know from years of experience of looking at what would be possible in terms of any kind of refurbishment in relation to that as a listed building. So we do have experience and there is precedent in related to that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I now have Councillor McDade followed by Councillor Purvis.
Thank you, Convener. If you may, I'd like to ask two very separate questions. As I mentioned earlier, I toured Balhousie this morning at length, and it is not an environment for children, I don't feel, in terms of there was smells of damp, the windows don't close in all the classrooms, single glazing, there's paint peeling off the wall, there's a leaking roof, heating that doesn't work throughout the building, there's dry rot. I don't consider that an acceptable learning environment for children, and I would like to know how it has got to be in that state, quite frankly, because I think the council surely has a duty to maintain it to a level that is, quite frankly, safe, and I don't think a building that's got damp in it is safe. And I would like, the second part of that question is to know what the council is going to do in the immediate short term for the next 4 years to bring it up to a standard that is acceptable for children to be in.
Stephen Crawford, please.
To just pick off, over the last 5 years, we've spent £250,000 keeping Balhousie going. Balhousie has been identified as a C condition for some time. To deal with a lot of the issues you deal with would require a fundamental refurbishment rather than picking off one element at a time. When we, in 2016, we identified as a C in the school estate management plan, and then the business case that identified a potential new school subject to options appraisal in this area was around trying to address those issues. We have maintenance programs that keep buildings going, but I would just have to say in terms of Balhousie, we're at a point where it needs fundamentally rewired. It needs a new heating system. There is asbestos in the building. We have restrictions on getting to the heating system when it fails because of the encapsulation of asbestos, and hence we're looking at a fundamental piece of work. And given working in schools is always difficult because they're operational 42 weeks of the year. So to do fundamental reworks, where do the children go within that time? And that doesn't answer your question of how did it get in this position, but this is we're coming forward here with a proposal to try and address this, address the environment for the children.
I just would want to say to you, Councillor McDade, that there's due consideration is given on a rolling programme basis as to what maintenance is required of schools to ensure that they are safe and secure environments. And there has been investment in Balhousie, not just in recent years, but over a significant period of time. There comes a point when a decision needs to be taken because of the condition of the building and the ongoing condition, the fact that you can only ever do a little and not as much as you would like, and what we have here is an opportunity to do something quite different that would provide a far superior learning environment for the children, both at Balhousie and indeed at North Muirton.
Second question.
Can I ask a supplementary to the first point, please, Convener? I don't disagree at all with the Director on that. I think absolutely the proposal does allow for a much better learning environment, but I think there is an issue in terms of, for the next 4 years until that learning environment exists, unless we expedite that particular build project, as to what those children are learning in a condition that is, I don't think, except I've never seen a school in that condition, and quite frankly, I wouldn't send children to it. And I think I take your point. It's a listed building. It's very difficult to do stuff to. However, I have been in a school where the heating failed. You bring in storage heaters. There are things you can do, and you can paint. We can paint the walls. We can solve peeling paint. That sort of thing does not. So $250,000. That's a lot of money, but if it means that we have to spend more money on it for the meantime to bring it up to a safe standard, I think we need to do that. And I would like to know that we are going to do something about that in the very near future.
If I can answer that, we review annually what our planned maintenance programmes based on every school. I have got officers around the schools, every day, every week, and every time we look at what are the critical potential failures, and we set our plans accordingly based on subject to the budget we have.
And you had a further question?
Yes, thank you, Katrina. My second question is around if the decision is made to close the school and to build a brand new school at North Muirton, which I think is a positive, the building of the new school, I think it would perhaps help with integration in terms of you have Balhousie, where about 50% of the children do not have English as a first language, where at North Muirton it's over 90%. You are obviously merging two staffs, two schools together, that perhaps when that new school is opened, it might be better off to have a new name, a new uniform, and have a new school identity that can be created around the two merging of those schools, rather than it being one school is being lost.
Question or comment?
The question, well, it's really a question is that possible to do, and would the Director and her team take that on board?
We hear what you're saying, and the reality is that during a consultation process, as I said earlier, anything is up for consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Purvis, followed by Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Convener. I would just like to probe a bit further on the issue of condition and suitability. So my comments are related to the various subsections of 7 under building information. Obviously in the report it says that the building is rated both C for suitability and condition, and in 7.7 it gives the various costs that would be required to upgrade the building fully. So including the decanting costs, we're looking at between 5.4 and 6.3 million to upgrade the building. But it also notes there various things that that wouldn't include, including it says no or minimal improvements to accessibility, which is somewhat concerning given that the school has been rated D for accessibility, which means that that doesn't support the effective delivery of services for children and communities. Later on in the report, it also says that by spending all of this money, excluding those things, it would only bring the school up to condition B. And the proposal for a new school would be a school that would be A in condition. So could officers confirm that any decision to retain the school, regardless of any upgrading costs, would still leave children in a substandard educational environment relative to a new school?
Carol?
I have to answer this one as the person who was writing the report, and that actually the part on 7.7 and the cost exclusions refer to the 2.85 million that is in 7.6. So as you have mentioned it just now, I have just noted that actually the 5.7 million would actually do the information that's in the exclusions. The 5.7, they would not be excluded. So the exclusions is supposed to refer to 7.6 and the information that is in 7.6. So they are exclusions in terms of the 2.85, but to put those in would cost approximately 5.7. It's not clear when you read the report. My apologies.
If I could have a supplementary though, but the further point in 7.9 which says that it would still bring the building up only to condition B, that point still stands, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
So therefore a decision to keep Balhousie and upgrade it, even with all of that money, would still mean that it would be a school with a poorer condition and environment than a new school.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Convener. In the consultation exercise, there has not been a single response from Balhousie School or the wider community expressing a preference for closing Balhousie School. Can you tell me where these responses are being factored into the options appraisal? I have a second question as well.
The community feedback is only one of the factors taken into account in terms of the options appraisal. It's not a formal consultation. The formal consultation would be the next stage of the appraisal. The purpose of the community engagement is primarily for rural schools, so it's to understand the impact on the community of a school closure potentially. We took the decision that we wanted to do the same process for Balhousie and for St Ninian's as well, so that we got an understanding of the community impact. It is within the paper, it's there for you to see. It did give us additional information that we didn't have before the consultation. For example, one of the options that we considered as part of the options appraisal was to look at bringing St Ninian's into Balhousie, and that was one of the points that was made at the community engagement. So we had the community engagement. It forms part of the report. It allows you to consider what the community have said, but there are other information as well which is included in terms of the factors.
Also, in consideration of walk to the school times, it is estimated primary school children, possibly accompanied by a parent and also possibly with a toddler in a pushchair, can walk 3 miles an hour. Is that realistic?
I walked it myself actually, and I think yes, with a toddler it would take longer than that. I think with a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old you might do it quite quickly. So it's an approximation, and obviously for different families it'd be different distances. A lot of the pupils live within a mile of North Muirton. There are some who live slightly further away. I think there's also the option of if you go by the lead, it's quicker and it's shorter.
Thank you, Convener. I have 2 questions. I'll ask the first, which is on page 192, section 3, under legislation, and it's about the Education Scotland Act 2016, and that Act places new duties on education authorities to address inequality of outcome caused by social and economic disadvantages. What I'd like to ask is, with this paper overall, where those duties are explicitly stated, and I have to say, reading through it, I didn't even really infer what those duties are. And I think that matters not just for this review, but for future reviews.
Sarah?
I think Carol's answer earlier did address the issue of where that is identified within the paper. I suppose what I would say is that those duties exist where the council is making a decision in relation to service provision. So I would expect those duties to be more explicitly addressed when you reach the point of doing a proposal paper in terms of the statutory consultation process, because it's at that point you're considering that particular proposal and to what extent that meets or doesn't meet the duty. So I guess that would be my supplementary answer to what Carol already said earlier on.
I have another question, but just a quick supplementary there, very quick, is I just think the legislation is still quite new. I think people are still starting to appreciate it. I think for future reviews, I think if we can explicitly set out what those duties are in a paper such as this, I think it would be helpful for all concerned. I'd also think here it does matter, because if you take on pages 190, what we got? 195 for Balhousie and 196 for North Muirton, the statistics on deprivation really are, very clear and come through markedly.
Yeah, Councillor, just for clarity, I wasn't suggesting at all that it's not relevant for this paper. I suppose I was suggesting that Carol had already attempted to answer that. But I absolutely accept your point that, yeah, it is relevant, of course, for this paper.
Can I just say it's genuinely constructive criticism. My second question relates to costs, and I was just doing some figures, and this comes on page 213. It's actually under, make sure I got this right, option 9.2, and that's consider closing Balhousie and moving pupils to a larger new build North Muirton Primary School. Now on page 192, it's 213, it states that the cost associated with a new build is approximately, I think the word approximately might be advisable, at 13 million. However, if the option that we were to go for, that's to retain Balhousie, but with a new build at new North Muirton for the existing catchment area, then that's 11.7 million. So the option that includes Balhousie is 13 million. That's an increase of 11%. Now, I can understand that there are economies of scale, but if you take the expanded school roll, then that is an increase of 49%, going from, I make it 228, you add on 111, I think that is the correct figure for Balhousie, rather than more than has been stated in the papers, I work out an increase of 49%. It just strikes me as there's not a disconnect here between 49% increase in school roll, but only 11% increase in the new build cost.
Carol?
It would seem it is disproportionate. However, we tend to make ancillary areas similar sizes for schools. So a school such as North Muirton at the moment has 11 classrooms. We'd be adding another 4 classrooms onto it, but the hall would remain the same and the dining would remain the same. Number of toilets would be increased as well. basically we do the same size of halls for our double stream schools as we would for a 10 school. So it is economies of scale in terms of the ancillary areas within the school.
I have to say, as a supplementary, I hear what you say, but nonetheless, I do wonder that figure approximately 13 million may indeed be perhaps a marked underestimate, but let us see.
It's based basically on the cost of Tulloch plus inflation. That would be the size of the school, basically. So, yes, if inflation is higher, then yes, it could be higher.
Okay, that's all.
Councillor Ribbick.
Thank you, Convener. I guess my point is, my question is about how relevant the catchment areas and about the pupils who go out with the catchment. Councillor Forbes made a valid point, but I'd just like to echo our Executive Director's answer to it, that it's very common for parents, for many reasons, to go out with their catchment area. And the really valid point here is, what is unusual is that Balhousie has to compete, if you like, with 2 denominational schools, and that I think is very relevant. What's also very relevant is that 34% of Balhousie's pupils actually come in from outside the catchment. They place requests into the catchment, compared to 11% for North Muirton, for example. And I think that just gives a good indication of to which degree the school's valued, actually. And I just want that to be noted, really. I have another question, if you don't mind, around the money, and that is that given that 16 million, it looks like to me, has been allocated for primary school provision in North Perth, and it's no more than an early earmark of likely funding, and also given that any primary school policy proceeded with now is likely to endure for decades, and also given that the closure of Balhousie School would mean the loss of the only potential site that can ever serve this local community as a school, do we not think that in 50 years' time, perhaps spending an extra £3 or £4 million now, despite financial difficulties, would be looked back as being a wise investment? Sorry, that was a long question, but...
Gazing some of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to argue that I don't think we assume because it's a couple of £1 million less that that's best value. It's the old quote about the cost of everything and the value of nothing, I think, that's relevant here.
Just on the question that Councillor Rebeck has raised, could officers confirm that parts of the building are listed, so it would be very unlikely that we could do a full replacement? Obviously, we've discussed the issue that we wouldn't be able to bring the school up to the same standard as a new build, and there's also no land in the nearby area to build a new school. So actually, building a new school is not in Balhousie is not really a feasible option.
That's correct. It's a grade 2 listed building, which obviously brings planning restrictions in any development.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. To move on to any comments on the report. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. I'll be straightforward if I may. This is not the strongest options appraisal paper I have seen in my time. It quotes facts, it makes assertions, it sets out assumptions. But in my view, it does not fully examine the facts, it does not fully challenge the assertions, and it does not fully test the assumptions. It does not balance the evidence in reaching conclusions. And it certainly does not present a coherent, transparent picture of the costs of all the options. Indeed, the cost of the selected recommendation is mentioned once, almost in passing, with a caveat on the reliability of the figure, and yet many other figures are derived from that without qualification. This paper makes no strong case for any decision, let alone one of the very considerable magnitude and enduring in terms of time that we might make. It certainly, in my view, makes no case for the recommendation it proposes. Thank you.
Do you want to go first, Sander?
Happy to.
Thank you.
I would just like to have it on the record that I think the staff are doing a fantastic job there. I'm sure the whole committee feels that it's an excellent team there, and hopefully that we will be able to preserve that if there is a move to merge the two schools. I think it is an absolutely unacceptable environment. I think the building itself has constraints that would not make it, as Councillor Purvis has already alluded to, possible to bring it up to the standard that you would want of a school. You couldn't have a sports hall of the size that you would wish nowadays, and it's not really a conducive environment for learning in its current state, and with its listed building having those constraints on it. I would like to see if there is a way that we could expedite the new building. I understand that you have a process of how you have a cycle for these things. However, I think that given the condition of the building, it would be, if the decision is to go ahead with the closure and merger, that we expedite that as fast as possible, because I think the building condition is seriously deteriorated. But I think that given the constraints of the building and with its current capacity and school rule, this is the best option, is to have a new school on North Muirton's site. However, obviously there are options to go ahead.
Just before I let you speak, Councillor Rubbick, just to note that I'm going to move the paper and hopefully have a seconder.
Thank you, Convener. I was wondering about that technicality, but you've answered my question in advance. Thank you. As we both are. Just to say really that unlike paper 6 about St Ninian's, it won't come as any surprise to you that we're less than delighted to support this one. In fact, quite the opposite. We can't support it. We have some grave reservations about it, and we wonder who else might have reservations about it further down the line as well. Completely fully support the new build school at North Muirton, but it is a community in its own right, and a new build primary school at North Muirton shouldn't come as a detriment to the Balhousie community, we believe. It's been there for 110 years. The school role has been largely constant for a long time, and I would like to try and make the subtle distinction between building capacity and school role capacity, and we sincerely believe on this side of the table that actually it is about 90% of school capacity, except in the fact that the building is empty. But like St Ninian's, we'd want to explore further using the building for other council services. We've covered the catchment thing, but there is a demand for parents to attend Balhousie Primary School, and I think actually if we could get the condition up to B, the parents would rather be in a condition B Balhousie Primary School than a brand spanking new North Muirton. The equality thing is also really important. 38% of the parents are in the worst area of deprivation according to the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation, and 59% are in ACON 5. Taking the local school away will not ease any of these inequalities. We will have some difficult decisions to make in Perth and Kinross Council and on this committee in the years to come, and I can understand why the savings may seem ostensibly attractive, but I believe that the brave decision today is actually to invest in Balhousie Primary. Education is expensive, but the benefits to society are immeasurably positive in the long term for good local schools. And I do believe, despite the reservations about the condition of the building, but I do believe that Balhousie Primary is a good local school, and it's that community that we seek to serve here. Most importantly, there's no support in Balhousie, as has been previously discussed, for moving to North Muirton. And crucially, as far as the merge is concerned, there's no support in North Muirton either. In conclusion, we'll support the SNP group here, will oppose the closure of Balhousie Primary School vociferously and without apology. And to that end, I would like to propose an amendment, will be to the paper. That amendment will be, if we can go to page 182, we will propose an amendment, and we would like to delete paragraphs 4.1 and 4.2 in entirety. And this is our amendment. In view of the fact that the options appraisal makes neither a well-argued nor a well-evidenced case for the closure of Balhousie Primary School and its integration into a new school at North Muirton, it is recommended that both sites remain in use, with a new school being provided at North Muirton and a fully refurbished school building being provided at Balhousie.
Do you have a seconder for your amendment?
I will second. Thank you.
And I presume that I can have a seconder for my moving the paper? Councillor McCall.
Yeah, I'm happy to second this. I think that it's right that Perth and Kinross are planning to invest in schools for the future of education in the area. And this is an innovative view where we are effectively bringing together two schools where both the buildings are holding back the children in the area. We're investing in a modern environment so children can be educated for an ever-changing world, and I think that's exceptionally important, and I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor McCall.
Still room for comments?
Further comments? Councillor Anderson, then.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, reading this here, this smacks of centralisation once again, and we're taking children to the top end of North Muirton from the area at Balhousie and its surrounding areas, totally out of their comfort zone, and taking them up to a school that they'll be, you know, it's two different communities, and fundamentally this is wrong. There's no reason why we can't do something to ensure that Balhousie is a fit and proper school for education. It's quite clear that there is quite a number of pupils there that are happy there, and the people and their parents are happy for them to be in that school. Obviously, people want it to be made wind and watertight, painted, and you know, it is baffling. And I really think that the report and the assessment is flawed. And a typical example of being flawed is the fact that it was assessed as similar to a rural school would be assessed, but then once that assessment was taken, then things get dropped off, which doesn't make sense to me. So therefore I would support the amendment by my colleague.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Purvis, followed by Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Convener. No one wants to close a school, and clearly people want to have a school in their own local community. The SNP have made some comments today about the lack of notice that has been taken to socio-economic impact, but there is quite a number of instances in the report where this is referred to in terms of the significant number of pupils from Balhousie who come from families where English is not their first language. The report does state that the PCAV's Minority Community Hub will still be involved in helping those pupils to integrate more fully into their communities. There is a real benefit that will be brought to some vulnerable families of the merge of a new school because of the purpose-built accommodation that will be available to deliver some of the strong start places. I think through the questioning today it's become quite clear that the building is not fit for purpose. And you know, we can paper over the cracks for as long as we like and pour more money into the building, but it's never going to be the same as what a new build school would be. And I think that any decision, and I'm quite disappointed that the SNP won't be supporting us today with that, and I think that any decision not to close Balhousie and to not to give pupils in Balhousie the benefit of a new school and state-of-the-art facilities would actually be failing the children in Balhousie, and I'm quite disappointed that we can't get unanimous agreement on this proposal. But I'm very happy to support the proposal that the convener has put forward.
Thank you, Councillor Purvis. Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Convener. There's no surprise to me that the SNP have taken this line. I read it in the Courier this morning. Us on this side of the table, I think we came with an open mind. We listened to the reply from the officers to our questions, and we've come to a decision. And as my colleague has said, it's an old building. I think it was built in 1903, and I'm sure our predecessors who made the decision to build it probably had the same kind of discussions in a room not dissimilar to this, but they made the decision. It was probably a bold decision, and I'm sure they made it for the right reasons. So I think we should follow their example, and I think we should grasp this net on. I think we should build a fantastic new school for the young people of Perth and Kinross.
Councillor Baird, Councillor Ribbett, you've already had an opportunity to comment, correct? Yeah. So I'll just let other people. Thank you. Councillor Baird.
Thank you very much, Convener. As it's been said already today, closing a school is very emotive. It's the heart that's ruling this instead of people really thinking about the future. This is going to be challenging, closing the school, but it's also going to be an opportunity for the children who are in P1 and P2, because I'm quite sure they will be involved in the new school, and as it happens, other schools, they get to go and learn about it. So it's always going to be a learning experience for the children. And I think if we had lots of money, we could refurbish this school, but it's still going to be a school, restricted, because there'll be still no outdoor play area, which is one of the greatest things where children can go outdoor to play. So I absolutely, reluctantly, this is where we are. We cannot make Balhousie an A-listed school, so I think it's a great news story that we're building another new school in Perth.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. I was interested in what Councillor Ribbick said, and I don't for a nanosecond doubt his sincerity in the way he delivered the points that he made. However, I think he's mistaken, and I'll say why I think he's mistaken. First of all, let's examine two fundamental facts about this whole issue, and this is just does not pervade about the schools we've got on the agenda today, but the whole exercise, A, of the capital budget, and B, of the school estates review. First of all, both of these have been agreed unanimously by the Council over a period of up to 3 years. Now, that is unanimous. I will make the basic point that up until fairly recently, the Council was run by an SNP administration. And therefore, and I want just to point out, on the first page of this report, it says there is funding of up to 16 million in the composite capital budget of the Council for 2017 to 23 for a replacement primary school in the north of Perth. A replacement primary school. This is the first time we've ever heard about there being a replacement plus a refurbishment, or even two replacements. So this, I think, is a rabbit out of a hat. When the chips are down and decisions got to be made, here we have one group in the Council actually saying, well, this is difficult, let's not do it. Yes, of course. Councillor Catherine Baird is correct. The other thing is this review was initiated when the SNP were in control of the Council, and we all signed up to it, including myself.
Sign up to closing schools though, Willie?
No. It was signed up to the review, Councillor Ribbick, and therefore, if you sign up to review, you've got to be prepared to accept that some of these decisions will be tough. We took a tough one about Forteviot about half an hour ago, and as far as the quality of the assessment was concerned, that's been challenged by a number of speakers opposite. There was no challenge on any of the other reports that were prepared or set out, and they're prepared on a similar basis. Much has been made about the socio-economic factors involved in this. First of all, I think in the future, if there is, and I hope there will be, an extended and new North Muirton Primary School, there will be a variety of choices for the public and a spread of schools. There will be a brand new North Muirton Primary, which, if it's anything up to the standard of Oakbank, Kinross and Tulloch, will be a huge asset to the community and all sections of the community, but particularly those who need additional facilities and additional resources. The point has already been made about the new housing in Muirton being delivered as we speak, and that's been answered in terms by Carol Taylor in relation to the flow of pupils, but it's also at an end of Muirton, which is almost as near North Muirton as it would be to Balhousie sites. I think the other choices that people have in the area are St John's, and we clearly see that people have voted with their feet in relation to that, because that's shown up in the numbers of pupils who potentially could attend Balhousie but do actually attend St John's. And thirdly, and I go back to my point about St Ninian's, that will offer a third choice to people in the area, which they will be able to access a full range of facilities, including nursery. So I don't think we can really make a decision based on a lack of socio-economic factors. My final point, I think, two final points. You can't have two, can you, Councillor Anderson? my penultimate point. If we end up with a school that's condition B, there'll be somebody sitting here, and some of the young folk around this table might be here, saying, I wish we'd done X at Y point. I don't want to be in that situation, because I think ending up with a refurbished Balhousie is not the most optimum solution to this. And finally, Councillor Anderson, my last remark, my friend, is based to you. You said this sounds like centralisation. You guys in SNP and the Scottish Government sure know how to teach about centralisation. Please don't come and preach it here. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Just to remind committee that the decision we're taking today is about moving to statutory consultation. It's not about making any final decisions, and that there'll be an opportunity for public, parents, pupils, staff and whole communities to get involved at the next stage. So just to clarify that, I think committee services have suggested that we have a 10-minute recess to go through the... So if everyone's... Well, I think that was going to be our first starting point, actually. So if everyone's content, we'll have a 10-minute recess. Thank you.
Okay. Trying to be terribly friendly, but also
Back in the box.
slap it.
Put them back in the
Slapping them down. Yes. No.